Welcome to the deep dive, the place where we really try to strip away all the noise and get straight into the architecture of our modern information ecosystem.
hmm
Today, we are peering behind the curtain. We're looking at what is probably the most powerful digital gatekeeper in history, the search algorithm.
Yeah, and it's so much more than a gatekeeper now, isn't it? I mean, it's really a full-time curator of your reality.
A curator. That's a great way to put it.
For so many of us, the internet is that search bar. And when you stop and think that Google controls nearly 90% of the global search market,
90%. It's an incredible number.
it is. And its closest competitor, Bing, is way, way behind at under 4%. You start to realize that the experience they curate,
Mm.
that's effectively reality for billions of people trying to navigate the world.
Exactly. You know, that simple act of typing a few words into a box, it's just not a neutral transaction anymore.
No, not at all.
The second you hit enter, you're initiating this incredibly complex ecosystem of tracking, of profiling, and really of high-stakes AI-driven curation.
And that shapes everything.
Everything. Where you shop, maybe even how you think about the world around you. We think we're in control, but we're really just participants in this massive optimization engine.
Right. So our mission today is pretty targeted. We're going to dive into the architecture and then the ethical fallout of this modern search technology.
Okay.
We really need to try and uncover how search engines, and we're talking mainly Google and Bing here, construct these personalized realities for all of us.
Yeah.
We want to look at where the algorithms are hiding, what kinds of deep biases they might contain, and, at the end of the day, what are the real consequences for your individual privacy, for how we construct knowledge, and for making informed decisions in a democracy.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources. I mean, this isn't just anecdotal stuff.
No.
We have granular academic audits that actually measure the precise amount of personalization you experience in a real-world scenario. We also have these high-level analyses of algorithmic bias in things like hiring and news consumption.
And we're going to look at the cutting edge, too.
Right. We're going to get into the integration of AI models, specifically things like BERT and this new one, the multitask unified model, or MUM, and how they're fundamentally changing what a search result even is.
So it's a journey, really,
Yeah.
from this immense financial black box that powers the entire system straight into the ethical gray area where, human values and machine learning collide.
Okay, let's unpack this. So to start, we really have to just sit with the overwhelming scale of this primary gatekeeper.
Yeah.
We talk about Google so casually, but the numbers that define its market control and its financial engine are they're staggering.
They absolutely define market dominance. I mean, just think about the sheer volume for a second. Google serves billions of search results.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Billions.
And if you look at the data, even going back to 2017, they had something like 67% of the U.S. market.
And now it's even higher.
Now it's relentlessly near 90% globally. So this isn't just a successful company.
Yeah.
This is a foundational piece of infrastructure.
It's like a public utility, but it's private.
Exactly. It supports global decision-making. It fundamentally constructs knowledge for the average user. And that fact alone just instantly elevates the ethical stakes of how their algorithms are designed.
And that whole existence, it just revolves around maximizing user engagement to feed that engine. Because when we talk about search, we are, at the end of the day, talking about advertising revenue. So what does the scale of that financial engine actually look like?
The financial scale gives you all the context you need for everything else we're going to talk about today. So Google Sites in 2024 generated an all-time high of $234 billion in ad revenue.
$234 billion.
It's a figure that's almost impossible to really grasp, but maybe the history helps.
Okay.
That number represents a growth of over 334,000% since 2001.
Wow.
So that astronomical figure tells you exactly why optimizing the user experience, making those search results as relevant, as compelling, as click-worthy as possible is the absolute core business objective.
Right. The incentive is it's all-consuming.
The incentive, above all else, is to keep you clicking, keep you scrolling, and keep you engaged.
Which brings us right to the core of the black box. How do they actually do the ranking? We should probably look at how the core system has evolved and what factors are sorting those billions of pages into the top 10 spots you see?
Well, the modern ranking system, it's not one thing. It's actually a collection of hundreds of automated systems all running at the same time.
Hundreds.
And it uses countless factors, or what they call signals, to figure out what's relevant. The basic ones are pretty obvious, the actual words in your query.
Sure.
The relevance and the usability of the pages it finds, the expertise and authority of the source, and then contextual things like your physical location and the settings you have on your account.
But those foundational systems have changed so dramatically over the years. I mean, I remember some of these famous algorithm updates that just completely reshaped the internet for a while.
Oh, absolutely. You can't talk about Google ranking without talking about the history. There was Panda back in 2011.
I remember Panda.
Yeah, that was designed to promote high-quality, original, deep content and at the same time penalize all that thin, scraped, low-value stuff.
Okay.
It was a huge push for quality control.
And then Penguin came along.
Then, in 2012, came Penguin. And that was designed specifically to fight web spam. It targeted link manipulation and all those unnatural link building schemes that were corrupting the rankings just by sheer volume, not by quality.
So those really defined the early 2010s in terms of just trying to clean things up.
They did.
But now the game has just fundamentally changed. We're talking about deep learning, large language models. We're so far beyond just matching keywords and checking links.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
The modern system is now underpinned by these really sophisticated AI components. And they're designed to understand intent and context way better than the old algorithms ever could.
Okay.
We already know about RankBrain, for instance. That was an early AI system that helped the machine understand how abstract words relate to underlying concepts.
Right.
Then came BERT. That was in 2019. Bidirectional encoder representations from transformers.
A mouthful.
It is, but BERT dramatically improved the understanding of query nuances and context. It could process the full sentence structure, the sequence of words.
So it wasn't just looking for isolated keywords anymore.
Exactly. If you searched for, say, can a giraffe eat grass, it understood the relationship between giraffe and eat and grass, instead of just finding pages with those three words on them.
And that just paved the way for the multitask unified model, or MUM.
Mm-hmm.
We hear this phrase, 1,000 times more powerful than BERT. What does that capability actually mean for you as a user?
The multitask unified model, MUM, it's a paradigm shift. So being 1,000 times more powerful means it can handle these vastly more complex, multifaceted queries.
Okay.
And crucially, it's multimodal and cross-lingual. So let's say you ask a complex question that involves both text and an image. MUM can process both at the same time. And it leverages knowledge across 75 different languages. So for you, that means you could ask a query like, I have this old jacket, and you show a photo of it. How do I repair this specific type of zipper? And show me a video in Spanish.
And it can do all of that?
Theoretically, yes. MUM can process the image, understand the specialized term for the zipper, translate your intent, and find the right video tutorial, bridging formats, and languages just seamlessly.
That level of complexity, it makes the ranking process basically impossible to review from the outside.
It's almost completely impenetrable.
So let's get into the ethical challenges that are just inherent in this financial model, especially when you think of Google as this massive, opaque gatekeeper sitting between all of us and the world's information.
Yeah, when we try to understand how this system works, it can be helpful to look at it through the lens of something called actor network theory, or ANT.
Okay, what's that?
It's a framework that suggests the whole search ecosystem is this constantly shifting network of relationships. And it involves human actors.
Yeah.
You, the user, the developers, advertisers, SEO specialists,
Right.
and non-human actors. The search algorithm itself and the data objects and structures.
So the algorithm itself is an actor in this theory.
Exactly. The value of looking at it this way is that it highlights how the algorithm, a non-human actor, has a level of agency and influence that's comparable to human users or even government regulators.
And the ethical conflicts pop up because those relationships are always being pushed and pulled by outside forces, especially economic ones.
Precisely. These shifting relationships are heavily shaped by social, political, and economic contexts. That financial imperative to generate that $234 billion,
Yeah.
it means the search engine's agency is often used to maximize shareholder value, not necessarily, the public good.
And that economic context is driven so heavily by manipulation, or I guess what's more politely called optimization.
Right.
You're talking about SEO, search engine optimization, and paid results.
Oh, absolutely. Optimization is critical to just existing on the web today. We see this so clearly with local businesses. Our sources show that businesses that really maximize their online presence through local SEO, they see a significant increase in their traffic, their brand awareness, and their sales.
It just highlights the undeniable power of controlling your visibility within that system.
If you aren't visible, you effectively don't exist online.
And then there's the whole distinction between the organic results and the paid placements at the top.
Mhm.
Google requires that ads be labeled, you see, sponsored or ad, and they claim that no one can pay for special treatment in the organic rankings.
And that's the official policy. Those labels are legally required for transparency. But
Right.
even with clear labeling, our sources note that sponsored search results still heavily influence what you do.
How?
Users often perceive those top position sponsored ads just because they occupy that prime real estate at the very top of the page as being more relevant or more urgent.
So their position implies authority, even if it's an ad.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
That placement prompts clicks that might have otherwise gone to a really high-quality organic option just a little further down the page. The ad quality systems are always being refined to make sure they're relevant, but the immense influence of just being at the top remains a powerful, subtle force in your decision-making.
So we have this engine that is just immensely powerful. It's opaque, and it's financially driven to maximize relevance.
Right.
But to get that supreme relevance, it needs to know every little detail about the person sitting behind the keyboard. And this brings us right to the core tension of the whole system, the privacy personalization paradox.
This is the zero-sum trade-off at the heart of the modern web. It's simple. Search engines give you demonstrably superior relevance through personalization.
Good.
But this capability requires the often unauthorized processing of your personal data and the continuous tracking of your preferences, often spanning years and years.
And if you, the user, try to fight back against this tracking, your experience just gets worse immediately.
Immediately. Exactly. If you try to control your configurations and you severely limit data collection, blocking cookies, using private browsing, not signing in, the results you get will inevitably become less relevant and less timely.
So by choosing convenience, we open the floodgates.
Yes. Conversely, by opting for personalization and signing into those consolidated services like a Google or Microsoft account, you're essentially opening up permanent access ports to your data. You're prioritizing utility over privacy.
And this is why so many people who are conscious of that trade-off, they start looking for specific alternatives. So what's the primary difference between a service like DuckDuckGo and these giants?
DuckDuckGo is the classic example of what's called a privacy-preserving search engine, or a PPSE.
Okay.
It explicitly says it avoids the whole idea of accounts, tracking, or profiling. The concept is that for any specific query, say best coffee maker 2024, you and I, searching at the same time for different places, should get the exact same results in the exact same order.
So it's an alternative built on privacy.
It's built entirely on what's called protection motivation theory. It appeals to users who value privacy very highly and are willing to accept what might be a slight drop in personalization.
Okay, so let's dig into how the dominant players, Google and Bing, actually build these user profiles. Because it's a sophisticated process, right? It's much more than just checking a box that says, yes, I accept cookies.
Oh, much more. It starts with what's called consolidated tracking.
Okay.
Services like Google accounts and Microsoft accounts, they unify all these different platforms. Your login status acts as a unique identifier, and then information is shared across all the services.
So my Gmail talks to my YouTube, which talks to my search history.
Exactly. If you're signed into a Microsoft account, for example, your Bing searches are tracked and saved, and they're linked to your broader profile, which also includes your email and your cloud activity. It creates this unified 360-degree view of you.
And what specific data points are they logging to build this conceptual profile, as the sources called it?
The profile is built on incredibly detailed behavioral data. The explicit data includes, the queries you submit, the little snippets and titles you look at on the results page, and crucially, the URLs that you ultimately clicked on.
Right.
Then this raw data is refined, and it's classified into a concept hierarchy, often based on structures like the Open Directory project, to create those conceptual user profiles.
And those profiles define what they think I'm interested in.
They define your long-term inferred interests, your expertise level on certain topics, your hobbies, your purchasing habits, even your political leanings.
That's the explicit feedback, but I find the implicit feedback, the stuff they gather just by watching what we do on the page, even more revealing.
Implicit profiling is fascinating. It's inferred from your passive actions. Research shows some really interesting correlations here.
Like what?
For example, the time you spend on a page after you click and the action of scrolling down. Both of those are strongly correlated with explicit preference ratings.
So if I stay on a page and scroll, the system assumes I like it.
The system infers that content is relevant to you. And what's interesting is that simple mouse clicks, just clicking on a link, were found to show no significant correlation on their own.
So it's not the click, it's what you do after the click.
It's watching how long you engage after the click.
It sounds like they're trying to predict not just our interests, but even our memory. I saw a detail in the sources about Google patents related to searching your own personal history and anticipating human forgetfulness.
That's right. That patent describes systems that are designed to classify queries, where you're asking for something you've previously seen. You might phrase it vaguely, like that article from last week.
Which I do all the time.
We all do. And to account for these common memory inaccuracies, the system might apply what are called fuzzy time ranges. So instead of searching strictly 7 calendar days, it might search the past 2 weeks to make sure it captures what you vaguely remember seeing.
So it's engineering the search result to compensate for my own cognitive failures.
In a way, yes.
Okay, now for the million-dollar question. We know they track us, but how much does that tracking actually translate into results that are different for me versus, say, my neighbor? Has anyone actually quantified the magnitude of personalization?
Yes, they have. And this is where the academic audits give us some really crucial and kind of counterintuitive data.
I'm curious to hear this.
One significant study provided hard metrics. It found that on average, across all queries, only 11.7% of Google search results showed measurable differences due to personalization.
Wait, only 11.7%.
That's the average baseline, yes.
It feels surprisingly low. I mean, given the intense fear so many people have about tracking, you'd assume decades of deep history would be molding, I don't know, 50% or more of the results.
You would think so.
So what was driving that 11.7% difference then? Was it all that deep, long-term profile data?
This is the major surprise in the data. The measurable personalization was primarily driven by 2 immediate factors: having a logged-in account status and your IP address, which gives your geolocation.
So it's not who I was 3 years ago, it's where I am right now, and the fact that I'm logged in.
In other words, Google was personalizing based on where you are now and who you are right now far more than who you were in the past. The accumulated search history, click history, browsing history, over a 30-day period, those did not cause the results to diverge significantly from the control accounts.
That really shifts the focus entirely onto immediate context, location, and login as the main levers of difference.
It does, but we have to stress, this personalization effect is not spread out evenly across different types of queries.
Right.
While informational queries, like what is, were found to be the most stable and consistent, the category of politics was found to be the most personalized on both Google and Bing.
Politics.
Yes, closely followed by places and gadgets.
That distinction is just critically important. If they're personalizing a review for a new coffee maker for me, that's usable. If they're personalizing information about an election or a major social issue, the consequences shift from being, economic to civic. It's a whole different problem.
It's a completely different problem.
Yeah.
And we also see big differences in how the 2 major search engines handle what's called rank volatility.
Meaning how often the rankings change.
Exactly. So search engines are very conservative about changing that #1 top-ranked result. Most of the changes they measured were just simple swaps between rank 1 and rank 2.
Okay.
However, when rank 1 does change, Google tends to elevate results that were already somewhere on the first page. It shows a preference for known authoritative sources.
And what about Bing?
Bing, on the other hand, often inserts completely new links, and frequently, these new links direct users to its own services or properties.
Yeah.
This is a key example of aggregated search, which is designed to keep you inside the Microsoft ecosystem.
Okay, so we've established that search is personalized, and it's personalized specifically around politically sensitive topics. And this brings us straight to the big, widely debated consequence: the filter bubble.
The filter bubble.
Now, Google claims its systems are not designed to put people in filter bubbles. They say they don't infer sensitive characteristics like political affiliation.
That is their official position, yes.
Yeah.
They deny creating these isolated filter bubbles. However, we now have results from some really rigorous mixed methods algorithm audits that give us a much more nuanced view than just a simple yes or no.
So what did this audit of partisan audience bias in Google search actually find about ideological leanings?
Well, the key finding was that there was little evidence to support the strict filter bubble hypothesis.
Meaning you aren't completely walled off from opposing viewpoints.
Correct. But the ideological lean of the results was definitely not neutral. The study showed that results positioned toward the bottom of the Google SERS, the search engine results pages, were consistently more left-leaning.
Okay, so the stuff at the bottom leans left. But if the lower-ranked results are left-leaning, how does that affect the overall political lean of the entire page, which is what most of us actually see?
This is the critical finding. The analysis used rank-weighted metrics. It acknowledged that rank 1 gets exponentially more attention and clicks than rank 10.
Of course.
And when they weighted the results based on their position, the study found that Google's ranking systems shifted the average ideological lean of the entire SRP to the right of the unweighted average.
So let me get this straight. Even though there are diverse sources on the page, the ranking algorithm itself favors a weighted average that tilts to the right.
In simple terms, yes.
So if the algorithm is supposed to be neutral, what's driving that shift? Is it intentional political bias, or is it a function of that optimization engine we were just talking about?
Well, the sources don't confirm any kind of intentional political alignment. But you have to connect this finding back to what we said in Section 1.
The financial incentive.
Exactly. If Google is optimizing for engagement, for clicks, for authority, and if sources that align with a certain weighted ideology tend to generate more authoritative links or get higher click-through rates at the top of the page, then the algorithm is just reflecting and maximizing those signals. It doesn't matter what the ideological intent is.
It's just optimizing for engagement, and the output happens to be a right-leaning shift.
That's what the data suggests.
This complexity, it really pushes the discussion away from the simple idea of a filter bubble and more toward the concept of selective exposure.
Selective exposure is key to understanding audience behavior. The evidence strongly suggests that people who are already highly partisan are more likely to proactively go out and seek like-minded content.
That makes sense.
But here's the nuance. They aren't necessarily less likely to use other non-aligned news sources entirely. They just spend less time on them.
And this polarization where you actively seek out brands that align with your views, is that a U.S.-specific thing?
It's highest in the U.S., but it's a global phenomenon. It's driven by these deeply partisan media outlets that cater to specific audiences.
Now, to quantify this ideological lean, the researchers needed a robust, fast measure. And they used an audience-based measure instead of trying to analyze the content itself, which sounds incredibly complicated. Tell us about this partisan bias score.
This was a really effective methodological tool. The partisan bias score quantified domain bias on a scale from -1, which is exclusively shared by Democrats, to +1, exclusively shared by Republicans.
And how did they calculate that?
It was based on the sharing habits of registered Republicans and Democrats on a very large Twitter data panel. This audience-based measure is just conceptually simpler and far less computationally expensive than trying to analyze the sentiment of every single article a domain has ever published.
But was it validated? I mean, we need to know that this measure of bias is actually trustworthy.
Oh, it was thoroughly validated. It showed what's called strong face validity, which means the scores it produced matched what you'd expect for well-known mainstream media domains. But more impressively, it showed remarkably high agreement correlations above 0.901 with other pre-existing, peer-reviewed partisan bias metrics that were developed using completely different platforms, like Facebook data.
So it's a robust methodology.
It's a very robust, externally validated methodology, which makes that finding about the right-leaning shift in Google's ranking particularly credible.
Okay, moving beyond the news for a second. The most damaging form of algorithmic bias is probably systemic algorithmic bias, where the machine mirrors and then reinforces these deep societal inequalities.
Yes.
How does this bias actually get introduced into the code and the data in the first place?
It's introduced in two main ways. First, consciously or more often subconsciously, when programmers embed their own assumptions about how the world works into the sequence of rules the computer follows.
Right.
And second, and this is often more insidious, bias gets embedded when the data is selected and fed to the machine. Because that data reflects existing human decision-making, which is inherently unfair and prejudiced and unequal, the algorithm simply learns those unfair rules.
And the classic example of this is the proxy problem, right? Especially in hiring, where platforms try to be demographically blind, but they fail spectacularly.
Yes. The audits of resume search engines like Indeed, Monster, and CareerBuilder illustrate this perfectly. These platforms, they actively avoid collecting data on sensitive demographics like race or gender to comply with equal opportunity laws.
As they should.
But the study audited these engines and found a statistically significant ranking difference between male and female candidates for the exact same query.
So how does that happen if the gender variable isn't even in the system?
It happens because of the proxy problem. All of the systematic societal biases, things like unequal opportunities, historical glass ceilings, patterns of occupational segregation, They are all baked into the proxy features that the algorithm does use.
Such as?
Features like years of experience, seniority level, or the college someone attended. The algorithm sees that, historically, people with X years of experience from Y school have excelled in this role. And if the data set overwhelmingly shows a specific gender in that successful group,
The algorithm just optimizes for that historical imbalance.
exactly. It reinforces the existing prejudice without ever knowing the user's gender directly.
So we're not fighting the algorithm's malice, we're fighting its perfect adherence to a biased historical record.
That's a great way to put it.
And we've seen public cases of this kind of technological redlining before.
Oh, absolutely. The infamous example of Google's autocomplete suggesting offensive neo-Nazi content when someone searched for "are Jews."
I remember that.
It demonstrates how these systems, just by learning from the vast unregulated text on the internet, can unintentionally embody racist, sexist, or offensive values. Google was prompted to act and change its suggestion systems because of the public critique, which highlights the need for active, constant monitoring of the output.
Another really stark example of using the wrong proxy comes from healthcare, where the metric used to optimize who got resources was itself biased.
That case demonstrates what we call label choice bias. An algorithm was designed to predict which patients needed more specialized healthcare resources.
And it used healthcare costs as a proxy for healthcare needs.
Right. And the problem was that, historically, Black patients often have lower recorded healthcare costs than white patients, even when they're equally or more unhealthy,
Why is that?
due to systemic access issues or historical bias in diagnosis and treatment.
So using cost as the proxy systematically disadvantaged Black patients who were looking for high-value resources. What was the solution?
The solution was both an engineering and an ethical one. They adjusted the target variable. Instead of optimizing the algorithm to predict cost, the researchers retrained it to predict actual healthcare need based on objective measures of health status.
And what was the result?
The result was that it almost doubled the number of Black patients who were selected for the specialized program. It just illustrates how crucial it is to critically evaluate not just the data you put in, but the explicit target the algorithm is trying to achieve.
Okay, we absolutely must pivot now to the present and the immediate future, which is just completely dominated by generative AI. Google is integrating large language models, LLMs, directly into the search results. We're moving from lists of links to these instant answers.
This is the AI-driven search experience. It's primarily showing up through what are called AI overviews, or AIOs.
Right.
These are AI-generated search summaries. They average around 5 source citations, and this creates a huge new visibility opportunity. For you, the user, it's instant synthesis. For content creators, it offers a chance to be seen, even for sources that weren't already in the top 10 organic results.
And optimizing for this new reality means playing a completely different game. It's not just about optimizing your text anymore. It's about giving high confidence signals to these underlying LLMs.
Absolutely. The content guidance has shifted radically. For AIOs to even appear in sensitive areas, what Google calls YMYL topics, your money or your life, like medical or financial advice,
Right.
the system requires extremely high confidence in the source's authenticity and reliability.
So how do you provide that?
Optimization now involves generating, implementing, and rigorously maintaining detailed structured data. We're talking about specific markups like product, local business, and organization markup. These help the LLMs categorize, understand, and reference your content accurately in the AIOs, establishing those crucial trust signals.
That covers content that's triggered by a specific query. But Google also provides hyper-personalized content without you even asking for it, through services like Google Discover.
Google Discover is a massive driver of mobile traffic. It's a mobile-only, personalized feed that recommends content articles, videos, news based entirely on your inferred activity, your long-term interests, and your engagement signals. It bypasses the need for a search query altogether.
And because it's so personalized and so influential, I assume it's screened pretty intensely.
Very intensely for policy compliance. Content is strictly excluded if it has misleading headlines, low editorial transparency, or uses manipulative engagement tactics like sensationalism.
And it sets some extremely high technical hurdles for inclusion, too. We saw a list of technical requirements called Core Web Vitals.
Correct. For a page to even be eligible for distribution through Discover, it has to pass Google's strict Core Web Vitals.
And what are those?
They ensure an excellent user experience on mobile. We're talking about things like the largest contentful paint, or LCP, being under 2.5 seconds. That means the main content loads almost instantly.
Okay.
The interaction to next paint, or INP, has to be under 200 milliseconds, ensuring the page is responsive to your touch immediately. And the cumulative layout shift, or CLS, must be under 0.1, which means the page elements don't suddenly shift around as you're trying to click on something.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
It is, and Google enforces these standards because if the user experience is poor, you leave the Google ecosystem, and that frustrates that $234 billion revenue model.
Right, it all comes back to the money. So returning to the larger LLMs, they're being personalized not just for search relevance, but for entirely new tasks, like generating content tailored specifically for an individual user.
Yes, we're seeing personalized LLMs used more and more for recommendation tasks, personalized news headlines, advanced Q&A systems that can enhance interactivity and, crucially, explainability in recommendations.
So what's the core challenge there?
The challenge is realizing that for the exact same prompt, for instance, explain the concept of neural networks, different users require drastically different outputs.
Right. A novice needs a simple analogy, while an engineer needs a technical definition.
Exactly.
So how do they train these models to handle such diverse, often conflicting preferences at the same time and in a coherent way?
Well, this has led to studies that frame the optimization as a multi-objective reinforcement learning task, or MORL.
Okay.
The system breaks down diverse preferences, like the desired expertise level, the required writing style, the tone, and it optimizes them independently, trying to find trade-offs between what might be conflicting goals.
And they use human feedback too, right?
Yes. We also see models using personalized RLHF, which is reinforcement learning from human feedback, to better align the model's output with specific individual tastes and attributes.
And I saw that sometimes focusing on a group is more effective than focusing only on the individual.
That's the idea behind persona-level personalization. This method focuses on optimizing preferences for user groups who share common characteristics.
So it's for when a shared profile is more important than individual quirks.
Exactly. It's highly effective when individual attributes are less significant than a shared defined profile, say. You're optimizing content for people interested in early Renaissance art or small business owners in the Northeast U.S. It allows for high relevance without needing every microscopic individual data point.
Okay, finally, we have to talk about the ultimate frontier of this, of hyperpersonalization, which raises massive ethical stakes far beyond browsing data. We're talking about genome marketing.
This is where hyperpersonalization evolves to leverage your consumer DNA data, which is collected primarily by these direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies, like 23andMe.
And what's the promise here?
The promise is highly customized products and services. Everything from specific nutrition plans based on your genes to personalized advertising for pharmaceutical products.
But these companies aren't just selling the kits anymore, are they?
Not at all. While the initial revenue comes from selling the kits, many of these DTC GT companies have signaled clear intentions to monetize the genetic data they collect. They enter into research partnerships or license the data, often under very ambiguous consent terms buried deep in the terms of service.
So privacy becomes an urgent concern.
An incredibly urgent concern.
And the willingness to share this kind of data, it carries a unique weight compared to just clicking accept on cookies.
Absolutely. Research is actively investigating the drivers behind your willingness to share DNA data. Because unlike sharing your browsing history, this decision is uniquely consequential because of the immutable and sensitive nature of the information. It reveals your health risks, your ancestry, and it even reveals data about your relatives who never consented. The ownership and control of genetic data are quickly becoming one of the most significant ethical and economic challenges of the next decade.
The complexity and the potential for harm that we've discussed, from systemic bias in hiring to the sheer power of the ranking system, it just makes it so clear that accountability is sorely needed. But the systems are proprietary. They're viewed as trade secrets. So how do you audit a black box?
Algorithm auditing methodologies are really the only robust solution we have. They systematically assess the system's output based on controlled input. They often use adversarial or synthetic data to see if the system shows discriminatory behavior or bias.
So you poke it to see what it does.
You poke it. And given the black box nature, where even a tiny change in input can lead to a completely unpredictable change in output, auditing is absolutely crucial for social accountability.
And it seems like legal frameworks are starting to catch up, at least in high-stakes areas like employment.
The New York City Algorithmic Accountability Law, which was implemented in 2023, is a key groundbreaking precedent here.
What does it do?
It mandates that employers using automated hiring tools, like those resume screeners we talked about, must conduct independent bias audits. and publish the results every year.
Wow.
It establishes one of the first legally mandated transparency measures for AI systems used in employment decisions in the U.S. It shifts the responsibility from you, the user, to the company using the tool.
So auditing finds the problems after the fact. Is there a framework for building ethical systems from the very beginning? A way to integrate human values into the design process itself?
That's the purpose of something called value-sensitive design, or VSD.
Okay.
VSD is a theoretically grounded framework that advocates for accounting for fundamental human values, things like informed consent, privacy, autonomy, trust, throughout the entire design process of the technology, not just tacked on at the end.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The very design of internet cookies, those tiny text files for tracking, it inherently challenges the value of informed consent.
Because no one reads the terms and conditions.
Exactly. The consent mechanisms are these long, complex legal documents that make true understanding and autonomy virtually impossible for the average person. VSD would force designers to create a consent system that is actually transparent and readable from the start.
We've also seen external regulatory pressure forcing change, especially from the European Union. They seem to have the power to redefine a search engine's responsibility. The right to erasure is a massive precedent.
It's a complete game changer. The EU's right to erasure, or RTE, allows citizens to request that search engines remove links to certain personal information that's deemed no longer relevant, or excessive, or inaccurate.
Even if it was true when it was published.
Even if the information was technically truthful at the time. This right was confirmed by the Court of Justice of the European Union back in 2014. It establishes a powerful mechanism for individuals to control their digital reputation, balanced only against the freedom of expression.
And this EU precedent requiring the removal of truthful but irrelevant information, it raises a really provocative legal and ethical question about fake news.
It does. The question forces us to think about the boundary of a search engine's responsibility.
Right.
If search engines are legally required to remove truthful personal information because it's deemed irrelevant or harmful to someone's reputation, should they also be required to remove links to content that is blatantly false and misleading, what we call fake news?
Critics argue that the legal precedent for forced removal, regardless of the content's truthfulness, already exists under the right to erasure if the information is deemed to infringe on a specific right.
And that challenges the search engine's claim that they are just neutral aggregators of content that's already freely available on the web.
It asks if they have a moral, if not a legal, responsibility to filter falsehoods, similar to their current responsibility to filter irrelevance.
And ultimately, this all comes back to improving trust, which is incredibly difficult when the internal workings of the algorithm are a proprietary black box.
So how can recommender systems, and by extension search engines, build that trust without giving away their competitive edge?
By prioritizing transparency in the user interface, recommender systems can significantly improve trust just by offering evidence for their recommendations, essentially explaining their rationale.
Like when you see customers who bought this item also bought.
Exactly. Or, we recommend this because you frequently search for news about this specific political party. It helps you evaluate and maybe trust the recommendation, but it's still an open question whether more transparency actually addresses the fundamental concern about potential behavior manipulation or the underlying biases of the system.
Finally, we need architectural solutions that keep user data safe by design, instead of constantly fighting these regulatory battles over data stored on centralized servers. I saw a proposal for entirely decoupling personalization.
This is a really sophisticated conceptual solution for future design. It's a two-layer system architecture.
How does it work?
Layer 1, hosted by the information service provider, the search company, generates non-personalized, standardized results for a query.
Okay, so everyone gets the same base results.
Right. Then, Layer 2, which is hosted locally on your own secure device, takes those non-personalized results and it ranks or filters them based on your personalized user profile, which is also stored locally.
So the genius of this is that my sensitive, privacy-related profile never leaves my own device.
Precisely. This architecture ensures that your privacy-sensitive user profile remains entirely within your own access-controlled domain. The central company never stores the sensitive preference data. It decouples the necessity of personalization from the dangers of centralized data collection. It's a clean, user-centric solution to the paradox.
Wow. This has been a truly complex and, I have to say, eye-opening deep dive. We started with Google's colossal economic power, a financial incentive fueled by over $234 billion in ad revenue. And that just drives the continuous, intense optimization of its AI systems, like BERT and the vastly more powerful multimodal MUM.
We then charted the hidden mechanisms of user profiling. And we noted that really striking and counterintuitive finding that while tracking is extensive, the immediate drivers of personalized results are primarily your login status and your geolocation.
Right.
And that creates the privacy personalization paradox that leaves all of us constantly trading access for utility.
And critically, we dismantled the myth of the strict filter bubble. We discovered that while individual polarization is driven by our own selective exposure, the algorithm's ranking still shifts the overall ideological lean of the results page to the right.
And we saw how systemic algorithmic bias, which is driven by biased historical data, leads to that insidious proxy discrimination in really high-stakes areas like hiring and healthcare.
We concluded by looking at the future, the rise of AI overviews, the necessary legal push for transparency through laws like that NYC bias audit mandate, and these architectural solutions like the two-layer decoupling system, which are designed to return control and privacy back to the user.
Right.
So what does this all mean?
I think it means that knowledge is only valuable when it's understood and applied. These sources, they show us unequivocally that the training data these algorithms rely on is inherently a reflection of our existing societal inequalities and power structures.
So critical thinking is essential.
It's more essential than ever in a world where the data fed to machines, and consequently the reality they project back at us, is anything but neutral. You have to question the results you are given.
We established earlier that the most highly personalized search categories are politics and gadgets. So considering the immense ethical stakes of algorithmic bias versus just the quest for raw relevance, the choice isn't simply about picking a privacy-preserving search engine like DuckDuckGo.
No, it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah. It's about understanding the specific query you're making. Are you seeking maximum efficiency, searching for a price or a quick fact, where personalization genuinely helps you save time? Or are you forming an opinion on a politically debated topic where exposure to diverse, non-personalized viewpoints is essential? And does your search engine even know the difference between those two intentions? That's something substantial for you to mull over the next time you hit enter.
Indeed. We look forward to seeing you on the next deep dive.